Okay, guys, the House has officially gavelled out, so they're going to be a big influx of folks coming over here, but we're going to start with Delegate Guyton is here. You've got two bills. Why don't you come up here, and this is going to be a sponsor only testimony on your part on House Bill, our first House Bill 60. And the floor is yours, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much, Chair Feldman. Vice Chair Kagan, I did get the information you requested. It was Senator Jenny Forand, who is being honored on the floor today. So the rest of the committee, my friends, I respectfully request your consideration and a favorable report on House Bill 60. And all this bill does is repeal antiquated and honestly offensive language from our Maryland Code as we speak about people with disabilities. The bill specifically replaces the term defective in code with the term impaired, particularly in the Maryland Division of Rehabilitative Services area within the education code. This brings us up all the way back to 1973. So we're going to fast forward 51 years ago and align Maryland's code with that was passed in 1973 with the passage of the American with Disabilities Act. So I hope this committee also recognizes the power of language, particularly in a department that is really created to help employ people with disabilities, and that you will decide to vote favorably on this bill to modernize Maryland Code and provide, empower those with disabilities. So there is no opposition to this bill, and it passed unanimously in committee and on the floor.
Okay, questions for Delegate Guyton on House Bill 60? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And we're going to go next to your second bill, House Bill 662, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much. Again, Delegate Michelle Guyton, Baltimore County District 42B. For the record, I am bringing before you for your consideration House Bill 662. This is actually a product of a working group that we put together in the Women Legislators of Maryland Caucus. We did a subcommittee on accessibility to childcare, trying to address some of the problems that we know that our constituents are having with accessibility and high quality in that field. So this bill simply allows well-trained students who have graduated from high school CTE programs in childcare or dual enrollment programs to directly join the childcare workforce. Currently in state law, it's necessary to be 19 before you can serve as a childcare teacher. And what we're doing is changing that to 18 so that when these folks graduate from high school or from these dual enrollment programs, they are qualified. They actually have the required amount of experience, and yet they still can't work purely because as a function of their age. So we are asking you to amend that so that we can actually pass this bill so that they can start working at 18 when they graduate and we don't lose them to other types of work.
Okay, any questions? We've got Senator Washington.
Thank you, Delegate. For this bill, how many new childcare, how many more people will this bill allow to come into the market and who are now would be available to hire?
And I can get that information for you, but I don't have it off the top of my head. Okay. This was one that was recommended by many of the child care advocates during our work groups, and they felt it would make a significant difference in increasing our workforce.
I just didn't know if you had it.
I don't, but I'll make sure and get that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for Delegate Guyton? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on 662. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
We're going to next go. I see Delegate Polakovich-Carr has entered the room from the 17th Legislative District of Maryland. And we are on House Bill, I might have said Senate Bill on the other one again. This is House Bill 760. Delegate Polakovich-Carr, again, sponsor only, and you take the time you need to explain the bill.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 760. This bill is an outgrowth of the work of the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee, which I serve on, as does Vice Chair Kagan and Senators Hester and Simonaire. For those who aren't familiar, the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee provides oversight of state agencies by reviewing audits conducted by the Office of Legislative Audits, or OLA. OLA is part of the Department of Legislative Services and is charged in state law with reviewing financial management practices for state agencies and certain recipients of state funding. OLA performs an audit of each of the 24 public school systems every 6 years unless a waiver is granted. In the most recent round of audits, OLA identified 171 repeat audit findings for school districts. In plain English, that means that there were 171 problems flagged by OLA that were not fixed and were still a problem 6 years later. And this was 171 instances of where taxpayer dollars could have been used better. These repeat audit findings cover a broad array of categories, from breaking state procurement laws to financial mismanagement to cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Some examples from the audits completed in just the past 2 years include award of a $900,000 contract without using a competitive procurement process, inadequate protections around user access to human resources and payroll systems, use of district funds to purchase gift cards, and lack of oversight on employee and retiree healthcare claims. Notably, every one of the 24 LEAs have at least one repeat audit finding, and at the worst end of the spectrum, there are 5 districts with more than 10 repeat findings. And in fact, these 171 repeat findings are higher than the collective number of repeat findings for all state agencies combined. So this is a big problem. In an audit conducted last year, OLA highlighted the need for more transparency and monitoring of repeat audit findings for school systems. So the bill before you requires each school district to publicly report mid-audit cycle about what they are doing to address any prior repeat findings identified by OLA. At least one school district is already publicly reporting this information on their website, and the bill would ensure that other districts are being transparent about their progress or lack thereof to improve accountability for their financial management. And this is a bipartisan bill that passed the House unanimously. We've spoken with Pazam and Mabe. I think all the stakeholders are on board and ask for a favorable report.
Okay, let's go to Senator Hester, then Senator Carozza.
So
Chair Kagan.
thank you very much for bringing this bill. I fully support the bill. My question is just about the redaction of cybersecurity findings, which we require in state reports. Is that addressed in the bill?
It is, and I would direct you to the very bottom of page 3 of the bill, and it says that before publishing it, any cybersecurity findings shall be redacted in a manner consistent with auditing best practices.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Hey, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this bill. In the interest of making sure the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, was there any discussion about how this would work with the AIB, the Accountability Implementation Board? Just, because audits are about accountability, and, you have now this other entity, and, you've got the blueprint moving forward. So just trying to figure out if if information is being shared or if there's any interaction there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Largely what the auditors, especially what the state auditors are looking at, is different from what the AIB is looking at for a district. So the OLA auditors are looking at whether or not a district is following state procurement laws, whether they are taking proper cybersecurity measures. Really, it's more about financial accountability on a transactional level, whereas the AIB is looking much more holistically at the policies, the programs that are in place by a school district. So I'd say they're looking at different.
But
issues.
Is that information shared?
Yes, I believe all of the reports and evaluations done by the AIB are made public. Certainly,
No, the audits
with the audits,
you're talking
yes.
about you're talking about the local school audits that are in the one system, and having these reports. I just wanted to know if there was if we have a process that's also shared with the AIB.
Oh, I see. Yes. So the OLA audits are public documents that are actually available on the DLS website. I don't know if they specifically share those with the AIB. I'd have to follow up and get you an answer for that piece. But, the bill is about making sure that it's publicly transparent about what's happening in the meantime between audits.
And I'm all for that. I'm just also for coordination. So thank you.
Vice Chair Kagan.
Delegate Palakowicz-Carr, great job, great bill. I have a question. In the amended version, there is something below the cybersecurity portion, number 6, notwithstanding paragraph 4, blah, 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 the committee can direct our auditors basically to conduct an audit of a local school system at any time. Was Mr. Hook and his team okay with that level of prescription? Is there anything that I'm just curious about timetable, workload, capacity to deliver, how much time it might take? Just, can you just speak to that and what their thoughts were about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is actually part of his existing statute that I think when we did the amendments on the House side that the bill drafter decided just to pull in as a reference. So that's already the current procedures that OLA can operate under.
So hypothetically, all 24 could be referred by the committee to audits, and they could manage 24 in some timely way.
That's the existing program. So
Okay.
I
Good.
think the answer is yes.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, additional questions for Delegate Palakovich-Carr? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 760.
Thank
I
you.
think I saw Delegate Wallach in the back.
Layman was here first.
Yeah, well, she's got two bills with
okay.
witnesses,
Sorry,
so
sorry.
yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yes, Delegate Wallach, we're on House Bill 811. And again, this is going to be sponsor only, so why don't you present the bill and tell us what it does?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Sarah Wallach, here to present HB 811. This bill establishes a 2-year pilot at University of Maryland College Park and at Morgan State University. Specifically, it tasks each institution to hire one financial well-being coach for a period of 2 years beginning August 2024. The purpose of a financial well-being coach is to provide students comprehensive financial guidance, support, and coaching. As this committee is well aware, there's no statewide financial literacy curriculum requirement for K through 12 in our state. So incoming students in college may have very little to zero background in personal finance, even as they're stepping into adulthood and making financial decisions, such as taking on enormous loans towards their education, managing the cost of living independently for the very first time, taking on credit, and much, much more. Those few who have had personal finance education in school have experienced it theoretically as a child, and it's a whole other matter to apply it practically day to day as an adult. This lack of preparation is further exacerbated for students who come from households where their parents or guardians themselves lacked a strong understanding of personal finance, communities historically discriminated against and actively prohibited from wealth building, and immigrant communities navigating a brand new financial system. But by no means is this lack of preparation limited to those most vulnerable students on campus. Instead, it is widespread among students of all means because an honest conversation about money doesn't happen openly and often. This is especially detrimental when we have a culture that continues to equate financial worth with self-worth. Add rising housing costs, food costs, unconscionably expensive higher education costs mixed into this mix without a corresponding increase in real wages, and you have a toxic combination of factors contributing to the anxiety that young people are experiencing. Financial well-being plays a critical role in overall well-being and seeps into how we do in other areas of our life, such as romantic relationships, work, wealth building, and service. If as a society we care about mental health and then creating and support, then we have to create support systems that prevent a mental health crisis, and a financial well-being coach will help do that. A financial well-being coach will work with students on both the technical and emotional aspects of money management. Currently, such positions don't exist on these two campuses or generally in campuses in Maryland. Universities do provide financial aid counselors, but their role is limited to supporting students with securing of funds to go to college, not so much what they do with the monies once they have them. And so at the end of this pilot, the University of Maryland, College Park, and Morgan State are asked to provide a report with best practices, processes, and guidance that other institutions of higher education can use to create a financial well-being coaching program. By piloting this position, our state can offer up a model of a potential solution for student financial well-being and serve as a resource for higher education, not just in our state, but in our country. I will also just point to the fact that many of the college students currently in undergrad have lived through a childhood trauma of the 2008 fiscal crisis. And so there's a lot mixed into what they're bringing to this topic. I do want to address a fiscal note. The average financial well-being coach's salary is about $55,000 a year. If you add a fringe on top of that to provide healthcare and so forth, it increases the cost to about $69,000 for each institution for a total of $138,000 a year. In terms of identifying students, the campuses can help students to self-identify those who are anxious about financial well-being, who lack literacy and or have loans. I've spoken with Morgan State and University of Maryland, College Park, and they see the value in this position and including it as a resource in their many offerings on campus. Thank you and ask you for a favorable report on HB 811.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. First of all, welcome, Delegate. I don't think we've had the opportunity to meet, so
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah. Why College Park? I think it makes sense, but why College Park and Morgan?
Yeah, thank you for that question. As we were thinking about this bill and crafting it, we wanted, because it is a pilot, we wanted to have partners who can provide access to a different set of student body. University of Maryland College Park is sort of flagship campus and has a very diverse student body from throughout the state. Morgan State is a leading historically Black institution, as well as has a higher number of students that are, having student loans. And so because it's a pilot, we thought that having two institutions that will cover and provide different perspectives would be very valuable, so that downstream, if we were to increase it and increase the reach of this position, those lessons can be shared broadly with different types of institutions in our state. The one thing I had considered potentially was adding a private school into the mix, but I wanted to at these onset keep it within these two.
Okay, so I feel like College Park already has everything. So do they already have this kind of thing? And I mean, why would we put more impact type resources versus maybe to some of our other schools and students who maybe don't have all of what's being invested already by the state and them that they have at College Park?
Thank you. So University of Maryland College Park doesn't have a position such as this. Actually, as far as we can tell, no institution does. And so we wouldn't necessarily be, they don't have that to begin with. In terms of adding more to an institution that already has resources, it's in this approach the other way around, because the institutions are themselves investing in this position. And so the resources will be brought forth by University of Maryland College Park and by Morgan State.
Okay.
So we are not providing additional monies for them, but we're sort of directing them to put it towards this really valuable resource for our students.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the champion of Morgan State. We're going to go to Senator Watson.
Thank you. And good to see you, Delegate.
Yes, likewise.
Your last statement, because I'm looking at both the favorable with amendments from University of Maryland and Morgan State.
That's right.
They both, based on my read, seem to view it as an unfunded mandate and requesting state funding for the position at each school. But you had just mentioned, I thought, that they were going to be able to cover this within their own coffers currently. Is that right?
Well, so you have the testimony from both of those institutions.
Yes.
I don't want to negate what they have put in their testimony. I've been very collaborative in putting this bill together, have been connecting with them over the interim as we've sort of tried to think through which universities to include as partners. And they see a lot of value in this. So they are support with amendment. So they do support it. Of course, they would like us to offer money for it. But as the one point of clarity is that the position doesn't cost as much as I think was assumed. Because it is a new position, I think part of the learning that's happening on the institution side is what the cost would be. And so the cost is actually a lot less than what I believe they have come to. if one does research on a financial well-being coach, we'll see that the average salary is only $55,000, not $100,000. That's just, so
No, I-
the
I thought your-
estimates
I
are a
thought
little
your
bit off.
Testimony mentioned fully burdened, it was going to be 138,000.
Together, both campuses.
Oh, both campuses.
Both
Okay.
campuses, and that would include the fringe. So it's, the average salary is $55,000.
Mm.
If you add a fringe of 25%, that gets us to 69,000 for Morgan and for College Park. Together, it's 138.
Got it. And my last question
Yep.
is, so this will just be another course offering, because based on the testimony from University of Maryland, they cannot use FAFSA information to try to determine what students would benefit most from this. So it would just be something offered in a course catalog that students just sign up for?
So because it's not a course, and part of the challenge was to figure out, should we offer support around curriculum, or should we offer support around programming?
Mhm.
So there's actually curriculum that exists both at Morgan and also at University of Maryland College Park. Of course, curriculum only gets to a handful of students. College Park, as you know, has about 40,000 students.
Right.
They have a class that has seats for 50 people. Right,
Okay.
so the reach isn't quite there. Students opt in to those courses. Similarly, this financial well-being coach is very much like an academic advisor
Like a
or a
guidance
financial
counselor.
advisor. So a human
I
being
got it.
who is there to provide support, and students can opt in. So instead of burdening the university with creating a system to identify these students, what they can do is to say, if you have financial anxiety, if you are burdened with loans, if you lack financial literacy because of whatever reason, you can take avail of this resource. Now, because it is just one position, just one person, they're certainly not going to be able to meet the needs of the whole campus, but it is a pilot. It's a step in the right direction. Hopefully, down the road, there can be more of this type of support provided.
I appreciate you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to AAA.
Thank you.
I have a question very similar to Senator Augustine, but I
Mhm.
come at it from a different perspective. My concern is that with the two institutions selected, there's neither geographic diversity, nor a good mix of an urban, more rural campus. So is there an ability to either select a different campus for the University of Maryland, either on the Eastern Shore or Western Maryland, or have the individual, the coach that represents University of Maryland, circulate to maybe two other campuses just to get a better geographic and urban rural split?
Thank you. That's a really interesting question. So part of the need for a pilot, of course, there's the testing out the position and working with students. There's that aspect. Then there's the HR aspect of the role, actually defining what the position is going to be, really creating a job description. That what the pilot does is essentially takes the burden off of institutions who want to do it down the road, because this job is essentially going to, you may have a bachelor's of finance potentially as a requirement for somebody who's going to do this job, or a couple of years of experience. So part of what the pilot is doing is identifying what the role is specifically in the higher education space, for which you don't necessarily need the geographic variety, because you're, a financial aided counselor at Morgan State is potentially going to have a very similar job description as a financial aid counselor at Salisbury. It's the job descriptions aren't going to vary as much. I think the student body may vary, but the role itself will not, right? So, if you're a physician, you go to medical school, you have a certain criteria and skill set that you develop. Now, you can practice in a rural county or you can practice in a city, but you are a doctor, right? And so that kind of fleshing out. I don't think we need necessarily a wide range of institutions to do, but I think potentially maybe there's another round where we, once the position is fleshed out after 2 years, we expand it to a broader, do a follow-on pilot and expand it to a broader scope.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, but I do think the role needs to be adapted somewhat to the student population. So I still have that concern, but thanks for the response.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for our sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 811. And we're going to next go to Delegate Lehman. We've got two bills. Let's start with the sponsor only bill. We've got House Bill 607. So we'll start with that one and then we'll go to the other bill next. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong. I apologize. I meant House Bill 420. Yep, sorry. House Bill 420.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. That's what I figured.
Yes,
And
sorry.
this bill is sponsor only because we amended it and no longer has any opposition. So you're looking, if you look up at your screen, you will see an example of a communication signboard, which is what this legislation is about. So good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and esteemed members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, and I'm here asking for your favorable consideration of House Bill 420. The bill requires the Department of Natural Resources to create a 3-year pilot grant program called the Maryland Recreation Communication Board's Pilot Program, and to allocate up to $100,000 of statewide program open space fund for each fiscal year. The bill requires the department, subject to availability of funding, to construct a communication board in each newly constructed play area under its own jurisdiction, so under DNR's state jurisdiction. But additionally, it requires each local governing body responsible for the construction of play areas that receives a grant from this program to install a communication signboard as well. It also gives those localities the flexibility of installing communication signboards in already existing play areas that are undergoing renovation. With these changes, DNR does support the bill, and I'm grateful that there's a representative here, Dylan Bear, in the event you have any questions about the funding piece of this. So communication boards, as you can see in that picture, are permanent structures. They display a combination of photos, symbols, or illustrations with both words and braille to supplement or replace spoken language. The boards are designed specifically to allow nonverbal people or people with limited language ability to point to images to be able to express themselves. For example, a signboard, I don't know if you can make out some of those pictures, it can display pictures of faces, sad or smiley faces, to help an individual communicate what they're feeling. Or it can display a picture of a toilet or water so an individual can communicate his or her basic needs. The grant will cover the cost of the boards themselves as well as the cost of installation. The funds provide up to $3,000 per board so that localities have more flexibility with what photos and symbols they can include on their boards. And then they can meet with local advocacy groups to ensure the boards best fit that community's needs. ResearchAutism.org characterizes the role of these boards as follows. By offering images as an alternative for spoken language, communication boards are more inclusive of those who might not be able to verbalize their thoughts and can help others with them to understand their needs and the thoughts of a non-speaking or a minimally speaking individual. Specifically, these boards in a public play area setting can help nonverbal children and persons with disabilities communicate with their caregivers, with their parents, and peers. Affected disabilities include autism spectrum disorder, speech, apraxia, deafness, blindness, and people with learning or intellectual disabilities. The boards can also help individuals with language barriers. Regardless of age or disability status, people should be able to communicate their basic needs to others. Mandating communication boards in public play areas across Maryland is an important step toward building a more inclusive state. And with that, I thank you for your favorable consideration.
Okay, do we have questions for Delegate Lehman? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 420. So why don't you stay there, and we're going to next move to House Bill 457, and we've got a few witnesses on
I
this one.
do. Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I could call up my in-person
Sure.
witnesses, Diana Conway and Dave Arndt.
And then we have one
and-
virtual witness.
Yeah, and I do have one.
Yeah,
virtual
Marie
witness.
Laporte, Port from Sierra Club is she in the queue? Okay. So why don't you lead off on House Bill 457, and then we'll go to the two witnesses, then we'll pick up our virtual witnesses after that.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon again. Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, esteemed committee members. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, and I'm here to ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 457, creating a chain of custody reporting system for synthetic turf playing fields. So this bill has passed the House for the third consecutive year and is now before this committee, where I hope you will agree that as stewards of the environment, we should all want to know where these synthetic turf fields are located now and where they go when they are moved, most often at the end of their 8 to 10-year lifespan. So while you may ask, do we want to know where these fields are now and where they go when they're moved, including when they are disposed of, when their useful life is over? So first, based on the 400 plus synthetic turf fields that have been documented by volunteers in Maryland, we're talking about 79,000 tons of plastic carpet and infill that typically consists of crumb rubber from ground up tires. This equals 144,000 cubic yards of infill and 28.9 million square feet of the plastic carpet, which is equivalent to 633 acres. And now we have an environmental issue that is of growing concern, which is PFAS. And that is the class of more than 15,000 forever chemicals used to resist water and stains and also as a binding agent. Synthetic turf is made with PFAS. It's used on the grass blades, it's used in the backing and in the infill so that it supports the carpet. PFAS, I know you know this here on this committee, has become a top focus of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. It has launched a major initiative and myriad studies to better understand the point at which it becomes toxic to human health and the environment. We already know PFAS exposure is linked to various cancers, birth defects, and other health problems. And EPA has determined that there is no level of PFAS at all that is safe in drinking water. The challenge of PFAS is that it's highly mobile. It's already ubiquitous in soil and surface water, but it can rub off the plastic grass blades from the backing that holds the carpet together and from the infill. Given this, I believe it's more important than ever that we know where these fields are located and whether they are in the ground being played on or whether they are disposed of in a landfill or elsewhere. So the bill requires just two things of synthetic turf field owners. First, that they report to MDE where these fields are located at the time the law takes effect and then going forward when new fields are installed. And secondly, that the owner reports to MDE where these fields go if they are ever moved from one facility to another, which I want to emphasize is extremely rare. We know really of only one instance in Maryland where this has happened. And more often, this is going to be when they are disposed of because they've reached the end of their life. So MDE will post this information on its website, first about where the fields are located, and then anytime they are moved. The agency has said consistently for the past 3 years, because this bill has remained unchanged, that it can easily administer this law and the fiscal note is minimal. This year's House bill does have a friendly amendment that was recommended actually during my many conversations with various senators and with a representative of the Senate President's Office. It's also supported by the Turf Field Managers Association. It would require the seller of a turf field to provide the buyer prior to sale with information related to the cost of field maintenance and removal, as well as the requirement that the owner will be the one to report to the state of Maryland the information specified in the bill. I also want to emphasize I am open to additional amendment ideas that I have heard are being floated regarding liability and tagging of fields so they can be identified if they end up in the wrong place. I believe documenting the chain of custody of synthetic turf fields is a reasonable step for the state of Maryland to take at a point in time when many fields we know are about to reach their end of life. So please help us create transparency around these fields, where they are now and where they end up. I thank you again for your consideration and I ask for a favorable report.
Okay, let's go to the two in-person witnesses, then we'll take our virtual witness, then we'll open up the questions.
Thank you.
So next up, Diana Conway.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and honorable members. Thanks for the opportunity to explain my support for HB 457. I'm Diana Conway from Montgomery County and president of Safe Healthy Playing Fields. We are a national 501c3 nonprofit working to equip communities and policymakers with peer-reviewed published research on synthetic turf fields versus grass fields. I want to thank Delegate Lehman for bringing the bill forward. This bill is about managing used fields as a waste issue to protect drinking water and human health. The Sierra Club Witness will address the volume of wasted issue. Despite years of promises from the industry, there is no recycling in this country. So the choices are landfill, incineration, and of course dumping, which is quick and cheap and not okay. Any temporary reuse is just a stop-off to one of those. We know these fields have a mix of heavy metals, neurotoxins, carcinogens, plus PFAS. The industry CEO has told the California legislature its members require PFAS to make the fields. This bill is an elegant solution for a waste problem, no fees, no permits, and no approvals. The bill asks this question. If you're taking out an artificial turf field and if what's happening next is not illegal and not embarrassing, why won't you tell us? The fiscal note is trivial and mitigation costs, on the other hand, would be daunting. I delivered to each of your offices yesterday a hard copy of a Philadelphia Inquirer investigative story entitled Forever Fields, How Pennsylvania Became a Dumping Ground for Discarded Artificial Turf Fields. We do not want that in Maryland. This bill is about waste management, and despite industry intimations, it is not a ban. Look at the favorables. These are organizations and people who use these fields. We work around the country as a nonprofit, and bans are a total non-starter. This is about waste management, and I'm not interested in engaging in quixotic theories when I've got what I consider substantive work to get done. We urge you to give this report a favorable committee report, and I would love some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Conway. Mr. Art.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and committee members. My name is Dave Arndt, a resident of Baltimore, a chemical engineer, a retiree of the National Institutes of Health, and a co-lead of the Maryland Legislative Climate Justice Wing. Thank you for listening to me today. While there are over 400 document installations of turf fields in Maryland, I'd like to share what's happening in my area, District 46. Recently, I watched Under Armour replace a synthetic turf field at their waterfront headquarters. The old field was ripped out, thrown into a dumpster, and is going to be disposed of. I asked the waste hauler where it was going. They did not know, but they speculated that it would either go to the Baltimore landfill or the incinerator. While I hate the thought of this turf field being burned or incinerated 2 miles away from my house, at least it was not going to end up in a pile somewhere where the toxins can leach into the watershed. Incidentally, this was quite a messy cleanup, with thousands of those little rubber tire pellets being dropped or blown into the inner harbor. There are at least 5 other turf fields close to the end of life in my Baltimore neighborhood. While they're basically unmanaged and the owners have really no idea what they're going to do with the old fields. This bill establishes a simple chain of custody for synthetic turf fields, basically to track fields as they are installed and removed. By simply tracking the life cycle of the turf field, Maryland can deter improper disposal and prevent contamination of soil and water from these fields known for their harmful chemicals. Think about the thousands of things we track. For example, hundreds of hazardous chemicals and pesticides, tires, lead-acid batteries, medical waste. We even track library books. It is fully documented that many components of turf fields are toxic. It is only common sense that we track turf fields through their life cycle. I urge a favorable vote on HB 457. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's get our virtual Sierra Club, and then we'll take questions starting with Senator Watson. Let's see, she in the queue. Okay, start your video. Okay, Ms. Laporte, you're here signed up favorable, and you're gonna have to be on the 2-minute clock, but we'll give you some latitude here. Okay, proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and committee members. I'm Marie Laporte speaking in support of HB 457 on behalf of the Maryland Sierra Club's 70,000 members and supporters. HB 457 addresses a serious plastic waste problem facilitated by a lack of transparency and accountability for disposal of synthetic turf. For the past 3 years, the Sierra Club has inventoried synthetic turf fields in Maryland to estimate their waste. I was one of those people who did that. As of this year, we have documented 437 synthetic turf playing fields in 19 counties and Baltimore, about 40 more since last year. 69 of those fields, more than any other county, are in Baltimore County, my home of the last 3 decades. Based on the characteristics of the average playing fields, these fields amount to more than 79,000 tons of plastic carpet and infill, more than 144,000 cubic yards of infill, and equivalent to more than 4,800 30-yard dumpsters, and roughly 29 million square feet of plastic carpeting, roughly 663 acres or more than 1 square mile. It's a lot. This is the waste that will be generated when these fields are replaced each decade, over and over. We don't know the fate of these fields that have already been removed, whether they were reused, repurposed, stockpiled, landfilled, or dumped. Our inventory posted on our website will serve as a starting point for MDE in tracking the waste if this bill passes. Accountability for proper disposal of synthetic turf and infill requires a chain of custody that is publicly disclosed. This bill will document the fate of the waste and serve as a deterrent to dumping. It does not prohibit these fields. I concur with Diana Conway. There should be transparency. People should not be embarrassed about where they're putting them. The Sierra Club respectfully requests a favorable report on HB 457. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take questions. We're going to start with Senator Watson, then Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Lehman. I remember this bill multiple times. And, waste management, tracking mechanism, transparency. So we implement the bill and we know where the turf fields are at end of life. My question, and I think you brought it up, what does improper disposal of these look like? How are, even if they get to the end of life, what do we do with them at that point?
So because there is no requirement for telling us where these fields go, the best guess by groups like Ms. Conway's and others is that that they go to landfills more often than not. We're pretty certain that no landfill in Maryland is, or at least we've been told most landfills in Maryland are not capable and are not interested in taking them. This is my 6th year with this bill, and we have surveyed regular municipal solid waste facilities informally, as well as construction and demolition waste facilities. And we have been told that by the biggest ones in the state, in Prince George's, Montgomery, and elsewhere, that they have never had truckloads of turf brought to their facilities, but if they did, they would turn them away. They have said we wouldn't be able to handle them by volume or by weight or by the component parts. And so to our knowledge, they are not being disposed of at landfills in Maryland. Probably they're going, if they're going to landfills in surrounding states, we believe they're mostly going to Virginia, remote, very rural parts of Virginia or Pennsylvania. Although, as Ms. Conway alluded to, there was this investigative series in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and it turns out many of them are being stockpiled on private land in Pennsylvania. And we don't want to see that happen in Maryland for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 questions. Senator Watson, I sponsored this bill a couple of years ago, and so I actually learned a fair amount thanks to Delegate Lehman and Ms. Conway and all that. So, Ms. Conway, neither of you guys talked about the cancer data. So if you can talk about what I remember so powerfully was soccer goalies. Can you just talk briefly about that? And then Delegate, I have 2 quick questions for you.
Sure. First of all, I'm not a physician, but what I can tell you about this, the cancer among goalies is it is what's called a cancer cluster. Epidemiologically speaking, I've got that word now, it is very hard to tease out which of the many things a class of people might have been exposed to in their life. The reason that this one in particular is remarkable is that many of them were first identified at the University of Washington, where a coach who's been featured on multiple NBC and ABC specials with Lester Holt and others, a woman soccer coach for goalies, started seeing that many of her goalies were getting treated for blood cancers, leukemia and lymphoma, which are apparently more frequently associated with exposure than necessarily with genetics. I'm speaking generally here, please. And so the concern was the coach identified that the only thing that had changed in her several decades of coaching there was the surface that these goalies are playing on and the number of times that they dive into it in a single practice. All that said, I just want to make clear two things. One is there is no peer-reviewed published study saying all these kids developed cancer, sometimes multiple cancers, because they were playing on that field. There's nothing like that.
Okay.
If there were, I'd be pleased to tell you, but there is not. And then, of course, the second thing is that while I have a personal concern about that, this bill has nothing to do
Yes.
with toxicity to people. This is all about environmental waste management and protecting our drinking water from what we know is in that field.
Yes. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. And I remember there was a dumping near my district on
In your
Goody
district.
Drive,
Yeah.
off Goody Drive, and pictures that were sent to me, and it's terrible. So Delegate Lehman, one of the questions that my former chair used to ask about this bill in particular was, how does it move the needle? So could you speak to that? So we have the chain of custody. Let's say it's totally accurate and we totally exactly know where every turf field is and how it's being disposed. How does that protect things?
Well,
What will
thank-
this bill do if it were
Right.
enacted?
And thank you for the question, Senator Kagan. And so first of all, the thing that we have emphasized from, the very first year I put forward this bill in 2019 is transparency. So knowing for certain where these fields go, there are a lot of claims by industry, and there have been for years, completely unsubstantiated, that there are efforts to recycle and repurpose it. We'd like to think that's the case, but there is no actual evidence that is going on. And I think, and I got asked this question by a Republican colleague when the bill was on the House floor, who said it's hard to believe with so much more emphasis now on repurposing and recycling, especially plastic products, because plastic has become so ubiquitous and so problematic for, globally, that more is not being done to repurpose and recycle it. Why not? And to that, I said, well, we don't know, but part of it is that there's not really a lot of pressure to do so. And the reason there isn't pressure is because there's this big question mark about what's happening with it. There are claims it's being recycled and repurposed. I found one evidence a few years ago of a very small mom and pop business in Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area. And it was a father and son operation. I think they were trying to do the best they could. And they had taken some fields from Maryland, primarily Anne Arundel County. And what they were mostly able to do is to sterilize the infill, the crumb rubber, heat it to high temperatures, rinse it, extract all the stuff out of it, the Band-Aids and bobby pins and everything else, and send it back to Anne Arundel County to reuse. But they weren't able to do that with the carpet. And I might add, I talked to a number of the employees, the owner and others, and at one point was going to try to arrange a field trip. They welcomed me up there. I'm not sure if they're still in existence. I do know that I heard and then subsequently read that they had been fined multiple times by the Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania for various environmental violations of what they were attempting to do. So we're trying to get at the truth of what is happening with these fields. And the second part of my answer is with transparency. We do believe when we see, if it is the case that the vast majority of them are either being landfilled or incinerated, that will create pressure on the industry to be more innovative and to actually figure out ways to recycle or repurpose them.
Thank you, Delegate. Very quick final question, but really brief answer, please. You just referenced trackable and sort of labeling. Can you speak? Because I think that's kind of brilliant to make sure that we know which and who did and why it's there and stuff. Briefly, what would that look like?
Right. And I think that's a great idea to more easily track it. If there's some kind of either number, an ID number, like a barcode, or the name of, the university, the recreation department, whoever owned it, if it ends up in the wrong place, if it's on the side of a road somewhere, if it's stockpiled, if it ends up in a stream, heaven forbid, then we know who it belonged to.
And then fines, consequences, maybe, but maybe that's not this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, additional questions for this? We've got Senator Simoner. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for this bill. Just a couple of questions. You brought up water quality, and I'm looking in the testimony. I don't see, we normally have testimony from Chesapeake Bay Foundation on issues like this. I don't see even information and I don't see the MDE have any information. Is that, they just didn't get it in, do you know, or why they're not weighing in on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to look at the written testimony. I think there is written testimony from a number of environmental organizations. MDE has not consistently not taken a position for or against it. They kind of put out an information sheet. They've estimated the fiscal note at less than $100,000, the cost of what they say would be one new employee that would be a contract employee to collect all the information from the owners and post it on the agency's website.
Okay, and the last question, I think it was asked, but I didn't get, say you track all it, where do you want this to be disposed of? I mean, I know we have hazardous landfills that you could put in that. I don't think it's classified as that, but what is the goal? Where would you like to see this go?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, not to not by the side of the road, not in a stream, not even stockpiled, which it has been. Again, it's been discovered on private property in Pennsylvania. It might even be happening in Maryland. We just don't know because we don't have the requirement, the reporting requirement. But the instance that Vice Chair Kagan referred to is just within the last few years, I believe the city of Rockville removed a synthetic turf field within the municipal boundary, and I guess didn't know what to do with it, and just so rolled it up and had it sitting in a parking lot for, I don't know if it was days or weeks.
It was a couple weeks.
Couple weeks
I understand
until.
where you don't want it. My question was, where do you want it?
Right. I'm just saying that's where I would not want to see it just laying around. So I think at this point, preferably it would be, parts of it at least would be recycled or repurposed until those, innovations are developed. I think probably the best bet is going to be to landfill it. Incineration is a bad idea, again, because of its component parts, but what we talked about, the crumb rubber infill, the PFAS, other chemicals, what crumb rubber includes, which is heavy metals and other toxins. I think burning it is a really bad idea. So, and again, we don't believe many of these, if any, are being landfilled in Maryland. They're probably being landfilled elsewhere. And if that is what is told to us, this field is being transported somewhere to, across the state line into Pennsylvania, Virginia, or elsewhere, that ends the tracking system. If it goes out of state and does not return, the reporting system ends.
And last question, because we're dealing with PFAS on a lot of issues.
Yes.
And we ban certain ones, and there's a lot of products out there that, the non-stick frying pan and tents and umbrellas, and trying to get a grasp of how do we handle which ones are not good for us and which ones are less not good for us. But I think what I heard you say is the end goal is you would like to get them in landfills. But I also heard in the testimony that you were concerned, some were concerned if it got in landfills, it would go into our waterway. So I'm not seeing the
Connect.
I don't see the complete circle there.
I just think based on what I know now, that would be a best bet absent repurposing and recycling. But no, that would be a real concern if it's a landfill, for example, near a waterway. And if I might just say, Mr. Chairman, I thought what you were going to ask me, Senator, is are you going to look to ban PFAS in synthetic turf? I am not looking to do that. However, the state of New York has already done that. That is a law on the books. It was signed last January, and I think they delayed implementation. It was a bill initially about banning PFAS in carpeting, regular carpeting, household and commercial carpeting. And then a significant amendment was added on to the bill, which the governor did sign last January, also banning the use of PFAS in synthetic turf. So New York has taken that step. I am not proposing to do that, however. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for any of the panelists, any of the witnesses? Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill hearing on
Thank
Bill 457. We're next, I'm just calling, just so you know, Delegates Boyce and Harris, I'm just calling folks as they came in. So Delegate Boyce, I think you came in first, and then we'll take Delegate Harris has two bills. So
Sure.
we'll just do it in that order. Welcome to Delegate Boyce on House Bill 152.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, here to present HB 152, Department of the Environment Study on Death Care and Funeral Practices. Just for some historical reference, this bill was introduced in 2023. as HB 869. It was amended by the House HGO Committee to better reflect the department's funding ability and to allow the department to seek outside consultation. These changes are reflected in the current version of this bill pre-filed earlier this year. The bill has also passed the Senate committee and made it to third reader in the Senate last year. While death is a sensitive topic, acknowledging the potential fear and contemplating the remains of our loved ones is essential to recognize the thoughtful consideration of how we manage these remains is crucial, especially when it comes to environmental and public health implications. Though researched nationally and internationally, an examination into the implication of these practices remains unresearched in Maryland. The bill requires the Department of the Environment, in collaboration with the Maryland Department of Health and Maryland Department of Labor, to conduct a comprehensive study on environmental and public health impacts of death care and funeral practices in the state, and allows the department to consult with outside organizations and institutions for the study. Conventional death practices like embalming and traditional burial are common, yet can be harmful. It's estimated that 800,000 gallons of formaldehyde are placed in the ground each year due to conventional burials. This method consumes significant resources such as land, copper, wood, and more, promoting the need for thoughtful reassessment of its environmental impact. Cremation is known to be better, more environmentally friendly an option than conventional burial. The practice is on the rise across the country. The cost is 10 times less than burial, but the process still releases carbon monoxide, sulfur oxide, and other heavy metals into the air that communities worry about. I can go on about alkaline hydrolysis turns the body into a sterile effluent, or natural burial, which is gaining popularity in Maryland. And we cannot forget natural organic reduction, which is a form of composting the body. Regardless of the method, we know it has an impact, and we must study how different methods impact our state. We have not, for instance, taken into consideration the number of active and inactive cemeteries in the state and how much land cemeteries consume. How much more land capacity do we have to continue to bury our loved ones? Cremation is on the rise. We have roughly 55 facilities in the state. What is the current impact on air quality given newer versus older technologies? And how much more can we consider or not? These are just a few types of questions I hope this study can answer, plus more. What will be the best for Maryland's land, air, and water in the future, and those who want the choice to have the best option for them and their loved ones? And with that, I will thank you for your time and your consideration of HB 152.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Boyce. Any questions? And we've got Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I appreciate, of course, this bill. Also appreciate the inclusion of the various crematory. We see a favorable with amendment or questions from the Maryland Catholic Conference about including, and so
I didn't hear include.
Yeah, so they said the department shall include in the study a report on the basic tenets of burial beliefs and practices among major religions. So I think in other words, be open to maybe adding that into what is studied. I think that's what they're asking.
The cultural, certain cultural practices?
Yeah, so for example, one of the things I found out with regard to you all were cross-filed, the crematory bills, that there's some specific practices around the Hindu religion about proximity to cremation, for example. So there are some just things we hadn't really taken into account. I'm not sure specifically what the Catholic Conference concern is, but they just would like to make sure that we take that into the consideration. So I just was.
Whatever the committee deems best that would allow the departments to study the different death practices. And if it's a certain death practice that is cultural, it should be considered. I would just say that you may have to double check. When this bill was initially filed last year, it was a lot more thorough and at a very high cost. And so the HGO did amend it to be very short and sweet. and allowing the outside study. So I guess it's so long as it still allows those outside
Yeah.
institutions to assist, I don't see it being a problem.
Yeah, I thought so. And then the other one is the sharing of the results with the public by releasing a summary of the results to the media and posting them on the Department of Health's website. And again, you don't have to answer now, but just
will
I
leave that
wanted
to the
us to
committee.
be that. Great. Thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Boyce,
See
for
you,
the bill
Senator.
and giving us the background of
Yes,
how
ma'am.
it went from one version to this. And just so I'm clear, and it might be stating the obvious, but this is clearly not promoting any one practice.
Thank you for saying that. It does not promote one or the other, but I think what my intention for this bill was to show, one, that we all have a choice in what we want to do. There are different methods that are on the rise that some people love and some people hate. But I think what this will do is show, one, I think anything we do, breathing, bad breath, for instance, has a negative effect on air quality, to a degree. But that they all have a positive and probably a negative environmental and health impact, and showing that, it's just a consumer choice. And
The study, and it doesn't promote any one choice.
Hopefully it doesn't allow anybody to I guess let me just put it this way. Some would say now you can research, they'll say this particular method is better than this one, or this one is worse than that one. We don't have that type of data here. And it'd just be interesting to see it in Maryland, just what the data says, but again, not trying to consider one on better than the other.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for our sponsor, Delegate Boyce? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the
Thank
bill
you
hearing
so
on House
much.
Bill 152. We're gonna next go Delegate Harris. Two bills. I'm gonna start with H, and these are gonna both be sponsor only bills. So Delegate Harris, let's start with HB 607, and then we'll go 678 after that. So it's all yours. House Bill 607.
Appreciate you, Chair. Great afternoon to the Chair, Vice Chair, and the esteemed members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. I am Delegate Kevin M. Harris, representing Legislative District 27A, which covers Charles and Prince George's counties. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 607 before you today. This bill expands eligibility for students using the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship to pay for non-credit certificate or registered apprenticeship programs, thus creating greater access and preparation for individuals to enter the workforce and advance their career by eliminating barriers to financial aid. House Bill 607 is crucial in ensuring students qualifying for the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship are not disadvantaged due to their inability to submit the free application for federal student aid. Since students participating in these programs aren't eligible for federal aid, there should not be a hindrance preventing them from receiving the necessary funding to meet educational requirements for specific professional licenses or certificates required for employment in their occupations. There is a positive impact on Maryland economy when we invest in students who enroll in non-credit certificate or registered apprenticeship programs. Community colleges offer education in many in-demand industries like IT, HVAC, biomedical equipment technology, and many others. With more students having access to these programs, we can expect these industries to grow and further support Maryland's economic development. For these reasons, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 607.
Okay, questions for the sponsor, Delegate Harris? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 607. We're going to next move to our final bill of the day, House Bill 678. Delegate Harris.
Thank you again, Chair. Once again, great afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair of this and the awesome committee members. Once again, for the record, Delegate Kevin M. Harris, representing Legislative District 27A, Charles and Prince George's County. House Bill 678 seeks to ensure Maryland public higher education institutions are committed to diversity and inclusion by mandating institutions have a written policy encouraging targeting recruitment and outreach efforts to underrepresented groups. By defining communities of interest, this bill ensures increased enrollment at institutions with historic unrepresentations of these communities in their enrollment, encompassing unrepresentative groups, demographics, or geographical areas. Targeted recruitment and outreach efforts are defined as activities such as college fairs, partnerships with community-based organizations, student ambassador programs, college access workshops, and/or dedicated support services for students when crafting and submitting college applications. With these efforts and the mandated report to the governor, president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, Maryland higher education institutions will create opportunities for unrepresentative communities of interest to access and thrive in higher education. According to the institution data dashboard for the University System of Maryland, 3,140 students attend the University of Maryland College Park from Prince George's County. Overall, nearly 15% of Mariners live in Prince George's County, yet less than 10% of these students are represented by University of Maryland's flagship institution of the University System of Maryland. With targeted recruitment and outreach efforts mandated by the state, Mariners can expect their university to resemble the state in which they live. The University System of Maryland and Townsend University have begun to make a difference in enrollment and retentions of unrepresentative groups. Townsend program called the Townsend for Baltimore has seen 100% retention rate for students participating in the program. Morgan State University's own recruitment and outreach efforts have created a diverse student body. Their efforts have been successful in creating a campus environment where greater than 50% of their students are Pell Grant eligible or first generation. Similar programs and initiatives have been successful in recruiting first generation students to Maryland's largest provider of post-secondary education, the University of Maryland Global Campus. Due to outreach programs at the University of Maryland Global Campus, 66% of their students are first generation and 18% speak English as a second language. University of Maryland Global Campus is also highly diversified in the types of students who are continuing education after working a full-time career. According to the most recent statistics, 78% of students work 40 or more hours per week. In addition, greater than a third of the University of Maryland Global Campus student body is made up of students with dependent children. University of Maryland Global Campus is also the #1 college for conferring cybersecurity degrees to women. University of Maryland Global Campus is also an excellent example of Maryland institution that has successfully achieved their diverse student body while continuing to offer a high quality degree program. With House Bill 678, Mariners can expect a similar commitment to diversity and inclusion in all the state higher education institutions. To this end, institutions with diverse faculty, staff, and students not only enrich an individual college experience, but it also serves our communities by preparing their students to become cultural, competent, and empowered leaders. Maryland has the opportunity to be a leader in this nation, guaranteeing that all its students have access to a high-quality education system. To ensure our students are the best prepared to address and thrive in diverse communities, workforces, and a global economy, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 678. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for our sponsor, Delegate Harris? Okay, we've got Senator Watson.
Good to see you again, Delegate Harris. Question for you. So this bill is really a mandated marketing bill that allows the universities to target kind of underserved communities or unrepresentative, but it's not related to admissions, correct?
Correct.
And I'm struck by, it's almost a 2-to-1 unfavorables versus favorables in here, even though nobody submitted any written testimony. So I can't tell what the issue is, just by ensuring that there's some kind of representation of all our colleges and universities at specific fairs and those types of things. So folks that look like me know what's available. Is that the purpose of this bill?
That's the exact purpose of this bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any additional questions of our sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on House Bill 678. Thank you, sir. Okay, that concludes bill hearings for today.